The following is a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
From the birthplace of modern winemaking, Sonoma, California, welcome to The Winemakers. Local experts Sam Couturi, Bart Hansen, and Brian Casey, along with host John Myers, invite you to listen in as they discuss all facets of winemaking. So sit back, pour yourself a glass, and let's hear what the guys have to say this week.
Brian's favorite kind of pour, white wine.
I've never
John, you
seen
have no idea how excited I am today.
never seen Brian so eager to be the one doing the pour to start the show. He's like, I'll do it. I got this one. I got it.
Today, and then when Charles was on and he brought the Bandol.
The Bandol rosé, yeah.
No, I
You
got
jump
it, I
in.
got
You
it.
know your moments.
Hey, everybody, welcome to The Winemakers. I'm John Myers with Sam Couturi. Bart Hansen is
It's somewhere.
in transit, and Brian Casey, and special guest today, Dan Petroski from
Massican.
Massican Winery.
Yeah.
Lots of different.
Is it it's a long A?
titles
It's not a
and
short A?
things.
It's not Massican?
So that's what
I've
I
been saying
thought
it
at
wrong
first,
for
and then I heard
fucking
Elaine, Chuck, and Brown
right.
talking to Dan, and she was saying Massican, so I was like, oh, I've been saying it incorrectly, but I don't know. We got him here, and I was asking him.
Actually, it doesn't matter what he says. If Elaine says it that's the way it is.
That's it, man. That's it.
I mean, it's got to mean something, right? So we should, if we found out what it meant, then
Oh,
then
you mean
maybe
ask
we
the
could.
guest a question?
Yeah, why don't we?
What does
Dan,
it
welcome
mean,
to the
Dan?
show.
How do you pronounce the name of your winery?
On a beautiful Sonoma morning, welcome.
Thank you guys for having me.
Smells great.
You made
I
the trip
would've-
across county.
Yeah, across county lines. I would have thought that you would have had a clip of a bottle being opened and poured into a glass and
Nah,
just cut it in.
we do it
but
live.
I love it. That
We
it's
do it live.
Oh yeah.
But no,
Oh.
great question. Massican is named after Monte Massico, the Massican Hills, which is just north of Naples, where my great-grandparents were born. One of the wines we'll be sipping on today is named after their granddaughter, my mother, Ania, and that's a wine made of, focusing on Italian white grape varieties, which Massican, as an entity, has been since I started in 2009.
What got you into this in 2009? You've been working all over, and
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
I mean, he was. We should start at the beginning. You, I mean, didn't start off in wine. You were like a writer and a journalist for a while, and it wasn't until early 2000s at Dumal, right? That you kind of jumped in with wine. But what was your life like before that? And what made you make the jump?
Yeah, so that Italian American mother Ania of mine, we all grew up in Brooklyn, New York, with my grandmother in
Brooklyn.
and having a great Italian grandmother at home too. So we were classic Italian Americans, with Sunday lasagna and all the pastas and the sauces and the eggplant parms and all that fun stuff that the Italian American food culture has.
Eat,
Yep.
mangia,
The
munch.
gravy.
And,
Sunday gravy.
So I kind of built my career as a New Yorker, high school, college, business school, all in Manhattan. I ended up going to work for Time Inc., as what you were referring to. I worked at Sports Illustrated and Time Magazine for about 10 years.
Wait, what did you do with Sports Illustrated?
So it was great. I mean,
Bathing suit issue, right?
I was yes. I was a hand model at one point. I used to work late, so
I wanted to mention you have beautiful hands.
so and now I'm just a white winemaker, so I never get dirty.
No kidding. No stains.
No stains. I used to remember when we used to compare our hands during harvest, and I'm like, fuck that, I'm wearing gloves from now on. Who needs to be Vaselining your hands at night? It's bad. So, I worked in the editorial side, building the websites for Sports Illustrated back in 1998, 1996, 97, 98. And not only building the websites, I was writing. I was the photo editor. I was doing, this is 1996 Web 1 internet days, AOL and CompuServe and, Time Inc.'s Pathfinder. And during that period, I built a couple of business plans for magazines, and the powers that be at Time Inc. said that I should not be building the websites for Time Inc. and Sports Illustrated and not be photo editing and writing the occasional story. So they pushed me to the Time Magazine's marketing and consumer marketing and finance and business side and advertising, and that's when I got into wine. When I started to eat and drink my way around Manhattan with corporate card from Time Inc.
Yeah.
And
Did
if I
some-
only
did some
knew
damage.
What is that? Can you explain that to me?
it was insane, guys. It was a $25,000. I shouldn't be saying this out loud, but $25,000. Like, you know, like I had $25,000 to $50,000 annual corporate dining budget,
And that was in 1998
in the
dollars.
early the
Right.
early 2000s, and I was eating at places like Veritas, which was considered one of the great wine restaurants of the world at the time, and eating at steakhouses and great restaurants. And if I only knew then, and what I did know then was there were things like Opus One and Insignia and Screaming Eagle on some of these wine lists, and I knew that my clients would point at them because they were the highest ticket price items. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
totally.
That's going to shoot my budget for the month, and I'd like to eat a couple more times at fancy restaurants in New York. So that's when I started reading about wine, and I literally joked, I read more about wine than I drank it because I wanted to know the stories behind it. I wanted to know the people. I wanted to be able to say, hey, these things called the Mistral winds that come off of North Africa into Southern Rhone, and they, it's how the great Syrahs of the world are made. That's why Joseph Phelps calls this wine Mistral, and it's a Syrah-based wine in California, and blah 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 blah. And I didn't have to buy a $300 Insignia on a steakhouse wine list. I could buy a $40 Mistral and save $240 per bottle. And then that shit got around to my friends, and my friends who all worked on Wall Street were like, "We're bringing Dan to dinner." Because Dan's gonna do exactly what he does with us, and he's gonna save us so much more money in T&E. and then we're all played football together in college, and we're all buddies, and we're all gonna party anyway. But if we could save a few dollars here and there,
You can buy more bottles that way.
buy more bottles that way. And I was reading the Parker Bible back then. I mean, he used to put out his book every year with the reviews in it, not just the actual, kind of print publication that he sent out to subscribers, but he used to actually publish a book, and used to read that. Used to subscribe to House and Garden when Jay McInerney was writing for that, and you're 20-something-year-old single guy in Manhattan with subscribing to House and Garden kind of looked weird on the coffee table, but
It might have worked though. There might have been some success.
it was I was an all-in magazine guy through and through, and but I hit a turning point, moved to Italy, worked on a vineyard for a year.
But why did you move to Italy?
It's the Italian American in me. I felt comfortable there. It was a place I traveled to on vacations. The language wasn't far off from throwing a few hands around the air, and
Right? Did you? I mean, your grandmother was in the house. Did you speak Italian growing up?
No, she was born here in America, but
Okay.
her parents were the immigrants, and they would not speak Italian around her and let her
Right.
speak Italian because she needed to assimilate.
Totally.
And,
No, that's the same thing with my grandparents.
My
Yeah.
grandparents or my grandma and her sisters all spoke Italian around us, and we knew that was something they didn't want us to know. That was the only time they spoke
Right, they spoke
around
Italian
us.
when they didn't want you to
yeah.
know what they were talking about.
Right.
So when you went to Italy and worked in a vineyard, how did that happen? I mean, that happens here, sure, because you worked at a winery here and someone's got a connection, helped you get there. You were out of the box, so to speak.
Yeah, I was just graduated business school. It was a part-time program at night and weekends or whatever that I did. And one of my colleagues was an Italian kid, and we all went and visited him and his family. And we spent a week, 10 days on the island, and visited a couple of his family friends. And they were owners of vineyards and wineries. And so when I had the opportunity to leave Time Inc. to go to Wall Street Journal, I said, if I'm going to leave this company I've been with for 10 years, which I believe and love and care about, I'm going to leave for a better reason than the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah.
No offense to the journal and their successes over the years and their publication, but
Chad, I don't think the Murdochs listen to the podcast. You can talk.
Pretty sure. Really.
but so yeah, I said, hey, I told my buddy, I was like, call the people who went and visited. Can I come and work there or something? And he was like, go work at the Wall Street Journal. I was like, oh, come on. I didn't take a break. It's sabbatical. I'll take a year. And so I took a year, and I spent 2 or 3 days a week going to the vineyard and getting fed a 60-cent, coffee or cafe, which is espresso, and maybe a croissant or something. And then and that was it. And I didn't get paid. I did that for a year. I lived with I rented an apartment from the Benanti family, who, if anyone knows Mount Etna these days, the Benanti family has been there from day one and making some of the great white wines of the world, and red now. I just got that exposure. Came back to the States, and I always say there wasn't like a LinkedIn wine jobs board in 2006, and I just so happened to meet Andy Smith at Dumal through the guys at Anthill Farms, Webb Marquez and Dave Lowe. And Dave Lowe was like, hey, it was 06 was a large crop, bigger than everyone expected at the time, because it came off 05, and 05 was monstrous. No one expected 6 to be so big. And Andy last minute was like, I need another intern. And it was a later year, so it was good. I got out here August 1st. And Andy asked also if I could spend a day a week working at Larkmead, and I was like, sure. So I did 6 days at Dumal, kept under like a legal visit,
because Andy was the winemaker at Larkmead.
Yeah.
And was that the start of the change of Larkmead, and then you, or was it more, you know what I mean, the growth and revitalization of Larkmead? Is that safe to say?
Yeah. So Larkmead started making wine again in the mid to late 90s with they hired Paul Hobbs, and Andy worked for Paul Hobbs. So Andy's 3 wineries were Dumal, Larkmead, and Gemstone that he covered as Paul Hobbs' assistant, one of Paul's assistants. Okay. And when Andy decided to leave Paul Hobbs, Dumal offered him, like, he was a Scotsman, so Dumal offered him a citizenship opportunity. And so he took his 3 wineries with him. He focused a lot on Dumal because Dumal was giving him, the paperwork to remain in the States, and thankfully they did. He's an incredible winemaker, and I learned a shit ton from him. So he was cool. He was kind of the winemaker at Dumal, consulting at Gemstone. He left Gemstone in 04. Larkmead built a winery in 05, 06. So I was there in 06, the second vintage in the winery. He needed someone in the cellar full time. I was an adult. I was 33 years old. He could trust me locking the doors at night. I knew my way around spreadsheets. I worked in corporate America. Right, yeah. I spent a year in Europe. He was a European. He knew that I was curious. I worked hard, and I was mature. Yeah. And so he hired me for like $40,000 a year, and I was like, "Fuck it, I'll take the job." Right. And that's how I started at Larkmead. Yeah. And
I didn't mean to jump ahead, but when we get a chance to hear those stories from the people that were there when it happened, as opposed to trying to remember it, it's always the best.
Yeah. I've been fortunate to have that experience. I wasn't planning to be a winemaker. Wasn't planning to make wine. I'm not educated to make wine academically, but it's just like, I was told when I was working. I was told by a friend from Sports Illustrated who was a couple years ahead of me in college, when I was offered a job to stay on at Sports Illustrated or move to People magazine, which was the publication of Time Inc. He said, don't get off a moving train. So he said, don't get off, don't leave the Sports Illustrated train to go to People, just because People's the bigger entity. And I kind of felt when I came out here for Harvest and I was working, every day from August 1st. And then by October 31st, Andy offered me, the Larkmead job to work in the cellar. And I was like, don't get off that moving train. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. He'd have to come over the hill and forklift some barrels around for me to do a racking, Right. I'm like, I didn't know how to drive a forklift. That was my biggest fear, was putting this,
no kidding, right?
Tines right through the head of 2 barrels. I'd still like to do that at some point. I'm sure.
I've seen it
you
happen.
Still can't drive a forklift?
No, I can.
Oh,
no,
I was like, wait a
the
minute.
mistakes on the forklift. You're certified on a forklift too now, Brian.
I've done that.
You put him through the fronts. I've lost barrels off of a 2-hide multiple times. Thankfully, they were Massican barrels, so that's my bad.
It doesn't hurt quite as bad.
Yeah, it's Napa Valley Cabernet.
No, it does hurt.
It hurts more.
And I love the Scotsman connection, because that's why you happen to see some Dumal barrels at Bart's spot, right, because he shares it with Steve Law
from McLaren.
Yeah,
and then also Jamie Kutch, and Jamie gets some barrels from Dumal also. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Oh man, speaking of Jamie, I mean, he's like, he worked Costa Brown Harvest in 06, same year I was working Dumal.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. I mean, Russell Bevan was around that year. It was a pretty cool class of people. Ryan from Rhyme was working with Pax that year.
Right.
Yeah, we had a fun little class. And yeah, I love Jamie's story. I think I always say there's like 3 business school case study stories of successes in wine. I think Jamie Kutch is one. I think Hardy Wallace is one. I think it's the way that they built their brands and like how they created audiences and followings and engagements back then was probably a model that a lot more people should have followed, but didn't. And
I got to get Jamie to tell me that story.
Right.
We gotta get him on. I mean,
He's like, you know, the elusive, like,
I know.
you gotta ask his wife. His wife pulls all the strings. She's the PR agent.
That's
So
the
Christian
trick
Green will still she pulls
Perfect,
all the
yeah.
strings.
I'll tell him you said that.
Well, so you're at Dumal. Then at some point you go full time over to Larkmead.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's like playing around in a little bit different sandbox, right? Because it's like, oh, this is the serious fucking people with money over here in Napa that like this is was the pressure on a little bit more? Did you feel a little bit more pressure being involved with that?
I didn't, because in all the research and reading I ever did about wines, places like Dumal and Larkmead weren't on the radar of, you know, I wasn't necessarily, you know, following the Parker scores and buying Parker wines at the time. I was reading Parker's Wine Bible, but there's, you know, it's a global publication. You know, it wasn't just a Napa Valley publication. I was reading Wine Spectator, but that's a global publication. So I didn't know that this was a historic estate until I had the opportunity to, like, the owner of Larkmead was like, hey, you know, you're in Time Magazine, so you should do the history of Larkmead. And I'm like, sure. Of course, that just totally makes sense. And then I did a chronology back to the, you know, the Donner Party basically, and and then I became just kind of the de facto historian of the place. And we jokingly used to say that was the most famous place you never heard of, which is true. No one ever heard of Larkmead. You know, people still call it Landmark. You know, I mean, you know, people still call Firebell Fireballs. You know, they still, you know, I think that we take wine too precious. We create wine being too precious because we're in it every day. Yeah. But the majority of people can't remember Massican or Massican or Ania or Larkmead or Landmark. And
well, especially because we're in the Mecca, right? Like we get it here, but you get over the Sierras and things change.
Dude, yeah.
In general,
60 miles out of this place, and no one wakes up in the morning thinking about Napa Valley or Sonoma County.
Well, no, remember the whole reason that Tor Kenward just changed his label to Tor's because people kept thinking it was Tor Kenwood.
Right.
So yeah,
You should have called it the Rock. Anyhow,
all right. So definitely different style of winemaking, right? Because in Italy you didn't make Cab, and at Dumal, do they make? I know them for Pinot and Chard, but do they make Cab there as well?
It wasn't until after Andy left Larkmead. So they were Pinot, Chardonnay, Syrah, Viognier, and then when Andy left, he actually did something he didn't really have a chance to do in his days in Napa. He was able to make wine for mountain fruit. So all the early Dumal Cabernets, I can't remember the vintage that he started, that 16 maybe, which is a great year to do it. He
got some Montecillo fruit, didn't he?
Yeah, he went all hillsides, and so he was, I think, Vitor. I think he
got Moon Mountain
for sure.
And then he does a Chenin.
Well, now he's doing everything. Like I think we all just started to do everything that came in front of us. And I'm victim of that as well. I work with 11 different white grape varieties and 13 different vineyards, 14 going to 15 this year, 16. I think we just become victim of that, and I think it's also a bad business model to kind of continue to be horizontal. I think you create a very thin, narrow floor. I mean, we feel like that's a way to bring in new customers and keep things exciting for customers, but I think we have to build castles, with the product lines, and that's my goal moving forward is focusing on things like Sauvignon Blanc, bringing in a Pinot Grigio program that I can scale Sauvignon Blanc. Work. My goal since day one, because don't like to drive, is like I want to work with farmers that continue to want to work with me and expand my relationship with them. So I get multiple different fruit sources from singular farmers. Chris Bowen, perfect example here in Russian River. He has, I get Tokai Ribola, Greco, Pinot Grigio, and then the leftover Fiano from that same vineyard.
Yeah.
It's really helpful when you're sampling
Yeah.
to not have to go to 5 different vineyards to
Right.
get, and that's
Fill up a Ziploc bag of grapes.
yeah. I don't even do that anymore. I've stopped doing it. The 2018 vintage was hysterical. I said, something. I've been working a lot of these vineyards for so long. I'm not gonna sample. I'm not gonna do chemistry on anything, and
Pure taste.
just everything. No sampling, no chemistry, nothing. I literally had to go and get a notarized letter to import my wines into the state of Connecticut. Like I had no ETS alcohol numbers, and they were like. So I was like, I'm not going to go pay and get chemistry done on a bottle of wine that's already been bottled. Because like under 14% alcohol, we have like 6 degrees. We could be, not 6, but we have like 2.5. Like I can't fuck it up that much. I mean, it tastes kind of the same as it did the previous year on a viscosity level. It's pretty obvious. It's 12.5. So I had to go get a notarized letter. And that was free because I got it from my bank. And it's supposed to like go in and pay the $40 at ETS. Like I would have paid $120 and popping corks to send in samples. And then I go to a custom crush facility and they're like, oh yeah, you have to do chemistry. I'm like, why do I have to do chemistry? It's like my wine. They're like, no, it's a reliability thing. They don't want to be they don't want to be blamed for something being screwed up. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not doing your chemistry. We'll just do a hybrid. And we came up with a really happy balance and we're both satisfied with the chemistry we do, and I don't have to pay an arm and a leg.
Just sent a check to Gordon.
Yeah, those ETS bills. You're like, you got your custom crush, and then you get the ETS bill. And you're like, oh wait, why do I owe another $5,000?
I know wineries, their ETS bills are in the 40, 50,000.
Oh, no doubt.
Just mind blowing.
No doubt.
Mind blowing. I've used my enologist and I really like it. I started using them last year for the first time, and I'm really there's the problem is you can't do a singular analysis. You have to do the full panel, but the full panel is $40. So even when you just want sulfur, you get the full panel. So just make sure everything's tracking nicely.
Yeah, it's good.
So at Larkmead, you did something kind of different, right? You like broke up the property into different spaces to kind of see how the wines were made and all the different soil types and all that. Will you talk a little bit about that? Oh, and we can talk about the Sauvignon
Can
Blanc
we talk
too.
about Sauvignon Blanc also?
I know.
Well, we had Sauvignon Blanc at Larkmead too, and I made the recommendation to pull it out because it was just financially not viable. And when you're farming in Napa Valley at the level of sophistication of 90th percentile fruit, meaning on price, or 95th percentile fruit on price, you're farming at anywhere between $15,000 and $20,000 an acre. And those numbers don't make sense for Sauvignon Blanc at 3 of.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, if you have a $20,000 an acre farming and you're getting 2 tons the acre Cabernet, that's why you get those prices for that fruit and the wines.
Yeah, this wine in particular is beautiful. Yeah, Nia.
Thank you. No, we when we converted to organic farming, and then look, certain things we did at Larkmead were kind of beyond tying every cane, clipping every cane vertically and for shoot positioning reasons and stuff like that. Like is that necessary to make great wine? No. Is it necessary that you need to have a beautifully aesthetic vineyard? No. Is it was it helpful for certain aspects of maturation of our fruit and airflow because we did have a very windy site up there? Yes. There are reasons to do certain things. Was it overkill? 100%. Yeah. I mean, like, I think no offense to the Hyde Vineyards, but Hyde Vineyards, man, that's the ugly beautiful, right? It's like the most beautiful fruit comes from some of the beautiful tasting wine comes from some pretty ugly shit, and no offense to Chris and Larry, I'm having lunch with them next week, but
that comes out in 2 weeks, so you'll be able to you'll be able to have lunch before they hear it.
I'll sign the contract next week at lunch, so I'm like, we're booked, man, we're booked. No, they respect that the vineyard has a natural form and it doesn't necessarily need to be tinkered with, and I think that's what I'm talking about being ugly. And I think Napa Valley was built on the beauty of postcard-like photography as you drive up Highway 29, whereas Sonoma County has a much more of that kind of, I feel like, that flow of rolling hills and kind of landscape beauty, where Napa tends to be a little bit more architecturally devised beauty.
Yeah.
Well, they want that postcard, like you said. We were with Andy Beckstoffer a couple months back, and he was saying, they have to retrain the tourists because everybody thinks, well, if that's an organic vineyard, it's not well taken care of because it's not trimmed. You don't see those beautiful dark, lines underneath the vines, etc. So, where you spray.
Retrain the tourist eye to what actual beauty in a vineyard is.
Right.
And, the fact is, you can still have totally perfectly manicured vineyard floors without spraying anything.
Right.
And, and that's part of why it's $20,000 an acre to grow those Napa Cabernets, because of the keeping up with the Joneses sort of vibe that every vineyard has to have, that, level of manicuredness. Also with Cabernet and, getting that uniformity of ripeness to get those wines and extractions and scores and dollars that the Napa Cabs demand, you have to put that level of detail in to, you have to know that somebody's paying that much attention in the vineyard to trust that you can then to spend $20,000 a ton or whatever. It's definitely a give and take and a push and pull. But you can have vineyards that are a little more wild and still make great wines, right?
Yeah. No, I agree 100%.
Right, so if people don't know, one of your is it a hobby of writing business plans?
Because if you want to, have a hobby, we could take one.
Yeah.
I love ideas, and every idea to me is, and I repeat this over and over again, I hope people listen, every idea is a pie, and you have to understand your place in that pie. Are you going to increase the size of the pie, or are you going to take a portion of that pie? And if you can't answer that question with a plan, a literal 5-year market-driven plan with dollars and cents behind it, is how you're going to do it and where it's going to come from and where it's going to go. Because making wine is easy, selling it's hard. So I love that, and it's not just wine. It's like I ask everybody, when you create a product line, how big is the pie? And 99 out of 100 people I've talked to in this community have no idea how big the pie is.
Yeah.
And then then I'm like, well, how are you going to fit into it? And I made those mistakes early on as well. I mean, I think when I first came out here in 2006, and I was, I wanted to do a little bit of everything. So I got into the tasting room and did some helping out there and learning all the things. And I learned the fanciest or best word, the best sales technique in Napa Valley was to say no. Because when you say no, everyone wants it.
Yeah.
And that's just a fucking bad idea. It's a good idea in a very limited scope. But at the end of days, that's just not a good idea for, as a sales business plan, to steal the pie or grow the pie. And so now I've just, every idea has a pie, and my mind is just trained to find how big it is and then estimate how big I can get it, and just do the simple math. Okay, if you own 1% of the pie, how big is your business? Basta. That's it. And then if it's oh my God, that's only a $500,000 business.
You'd be amazed at the number of corporations in this country who really don't pay attention to that kind of thing. They just don't. They rely on their agency or a consultant to do it for them because they're just not classical marketers.
My mind thinks in spreadsheets and numbers and derivatives of numbers and trends and trend lines and successes and failures of things, ups and downs and markets. And I just happen to make wine as well.
And isn't that kind of how Massican started? Is you wrote a business plan for making red wine, sent it to some friends of yours, and they kind of looked at it and they were like, oh, this numbers don't really add up. So then you just switched it to white wine, and all of a sudden, bing, bing.
Cash flow.
Turnaround.
It was, turnaround, depletions,
Sorry,
and placements.
Well, no, I mean, where my mind was on this, and this is like maybe the hardest hitting question I'll ever ask in this setting. White wine historically is harder to sell than red wine, and people, for the most part, there's the white wine only drinker is a much smaller piece of the pie than the red wine only drinker. How do you write a business plan that's going to make I don't know how many different white wines, 11 different varieties of white wine, a white wine only brand. We love it, but we're also like in this bubble of wine nerddom. What does that business plan look like? What does that pie like when it's a white wine only brand?
You are 100% correct in your statements on one
First time ever
on one account, not on the overall big picture pie.
Okay.
You're correct if the pie is only Napa, Sonoma, and direct to consumer.
Okay.
Selling white wine only direct to consumer has been a fucking hard battle. It is easy for people to buy red wine. Because those are the things that get written about. Those are the things that have social currency for bankers who live in Greenwich, Connecticut, and like want to impress their boys on Wall Street. The coolest Pinot Grigio is not going to do that. So I agree with you 100%, Sam. It is really difficult to sell white wine, especially direct to consumer. Overall, if you look at the big pie, 51% of wine sold in America are white wine. The number one wine sold in that category is $14.99 Chardonnay. We all know that's KJ Vintners Reserve it drives that market. So there is white wine is a supermarket brand in essence. Right. It's when mom goes shopping, women are the gatekeepers of the household budgets when they go shopping on Saturday, and they're shopping in places that sell wine in supermarkets. And I didn't have that in New York growing up. They're going down the aisle and pulling bottles, and they're pulling cheap, easy, things that aren't going to get them drunk because they have kids to worry about, all the other things. But they want enough buzz to as I always joke around, the best commercial of all time, and it's like the leading force behind Massican's vision, is the old Calgon "Take Me Away" commercial. At the end of the day, the bubble bath. You're too young for it, I think.
Yeah. Sound of that reference going over my head.
Yeah. But I think
can picture it.
You know what I mean? It's like that's like Massican. We talked about this when we walked in. I don't have a physical space or a vineyard to engage a consumer's memory. I have to trigger something else in their life. And so my theory is, where do you want to drink a glass of wine? You want to drink it on a beach? You want to drink it on vacation? You want to drink it after a hard day's work? Do you want to drink it on Thursday night at a gallery opening? Do you want to drink it when you're Netflix and chilling? Do you want to drink it when you're reading a book? Do you want to drink it while you're, I don't know, painting the new baby's room or something? I don't know. But like, where do you want to drink a glass of wine? And that's where I'm trying to fit Massican into the equation.
All right. That's a great answer.
Yeah, and for you personally, what are you drinking in your personal life mostly? Is it more white than red?
Oh, for sure. I said this to a member of my tasting group a couple of weeks ago, and he was stunned. He literally fell off the seat. I said, I never open a bottle of wine home alone, because wine is not. I personally just don't have the desire to drink a glass of wine by myself and tell myself the story behind the wine. It's all about that 30-second elevator pitch. It's like what the Psalms do for us when we go to a restaurant. We engage with a wine we're not familiar with. It's what hopefully our friends do with us. Hopefully our tasting groups do with us. All those things. And so I never. And he was like, "You're fucking kidding me." I was like, "Yeah, 16 years here in California, I've never opened a bottle of wine by myself alone." I came from the advertising world and marketing and magazines and publishing, and the Mad Men era was still alive and well when I got there. So we were a big 3-martini lunch crowd back then. And so cocktails were in my vein. My wife thinks I should be a bartender and not a winemaker. I mixed every martini by hand during the pandemic for my pod, which was a group of champion martini drinkers. I mean, sane martini drinkers.
It's probably the first vaccine.
Yeah.
Some gin, some vodka, maybe a little dry Vermouth.
Martini glass.
Never got COVID.
It's a perfect mask. The classic martini glass. And
can I get a picture of that for the?
You guys got to get some coupes or something for your guests. So yeah, and so long answer to that question is, I love. There's a couple of wines over the years that just do it for me, and and I don't have a winery tasting space or anything. If you want to have a winery tasting with me, we go to, if we can find the time, we go to Don Giovanni at 3:30, and I'm doing that today. And we order some fried olives and some frito misto, and I order Melissa Cuomo's Falanghina right off the list, and I ordered Massican off the list, and I tell the stories of Massican, drink Massican, but I probably drink more of that Melissa Cuomo white wines off that Don Giovanni list, and in the last 4 or 5 years.
Great restaurant, but I've never heard of fried olives. I've heard of warm olives.
They're not they're off the list. They're off the menu. So you got to
be there at that 3:30 crowd.
Okay, yeah.
They only used to serve them. They used to only serve them at lunch or till sold out.
Are they pan sautéed or are they?
I don't know. It's still a mystery. That's why it's so beautiful.
Okay.
Just like wine. Just like wine. No one knows how we make it. It's just it's
That part's true.
unicorns and rainbows.
If I'm like that, for me, aromatically, white wines turn me on much more than red wines do.
Right.
And then crushability for, if I want to, if we're sitting around
Open a
and I
bottle of
want to
wine
have,
by yourself
and I
at
want, see, I'm not doing that anymore because I'm not getting off at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning and coming home to an empty house and opening up a bottle of wine. But I want to have a couple glasses. And for me, red wine, if I have a couple glasses of red wine, I'm going down some dark tunnels. And Falanghina and Greco di Tufo, two of my favorite go-tos from honeymooning in Italy, and finding those Campagna wines was like the game-changing for me. Something that has acidity but has some body to it. So how many different varietals are you playing around with? And how do you put them together? Because you're not necessarily putting all Italian varietals in one.
Yeah. So Andy Smith gave me a lot of words of wisdom over the years. And I think when I first, in December of 2009, after my first vintage, I only wanted to make Ania. And I only wanted to make a white wine blend, like a Collio Bianco style, a Friuli blend with some Tokai, Ribolla, Sauvignon Blanc, some Chardonnay, whatever. Those were actually the 4 grapes I had at the time. And the Sauvignon Blanc didn't fit, even at like 10%. It was only 2 barrels of Sauvignon Blanc on a 400 case blend. So it was like, it didn't fit. And I didn't want to believe it didn't fit. Andy was like, it doesn't fit. Don't force it. That was it. And he wasn't a man of a lot of words. And, it's like, once he said, don't force it, I made a 50 case Sauvignon Blanc as a standalone wine. And then I, over the years, I just went, kept growing and growing and growing. And I didn't want to make more than 3 wines or 4 wines. And then I realized that I was making a lot of vermouth in 2011, and I started that program, and anything that didn't fit into the core blends went to the vermouth program, and that was working for a number of years. But the vermouth program was just a financial failure, but I didn't want to believe it because it was cool, and I drank a lot of it myself.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but did you find that in other parts of the world they were drinking vermouth as like an aperitif, and it just not happening here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Sherry,
never
kind
going
of
to
same
happen.
thing. It's
Sherry, vermouth, after dinner drinks. Like we're not port people. We're not Sauternes people. We're not, these classic, kind of fortified wines of the world, or, we are cocktail people. And I think this country drinks a lot of vermouth and cocktails, and they don't know what it is. Yeah. And they don't care. I had someone drink a bottle of my vermouth once and call up my Massican winery number and was like, "Why does your wine smell like turpentine?" And I was like, "That's a fucking problem." And I'm like, I knew right away what he was talking about. So I was like, it's obviously, and that's fine, and that's totally fine. I'm okay with that, and
just one thought about, or a question about the Sauvignon Blanc not working. Was it like was there something that added to it that you liked? That's why you struggled with it, or did it just didn't work anyway?
You need to use it.
Well, no, I know that you needed to use it, of course, right?
But it's like the thing we always talk about, like Syrah or Rhone blend.
Right. It overwhelmed
at 8% it's fine. At 10% it's too much.
Right.
Right. Was that
it, or was it a textural thing? And I know this is hard, but just trying to wrap my head around like where you were at with it, or what was it that Andy saw clearly that you didn't see? How about that?
Andy was one of the best blenders I have ever seen. Like, he can see blends before they materialize. Like, he spent a lot of time looking at spreadsheets and saw blends. Like, he saw them in advance, and I think he just had a photo. Yeah, I think he had a photographic memory of taste and palate. So he'd come through the winery, once a week during harvest, taste the tanks, taste the barrels when they were all barreled down, and then like go back, build his spreadsheets, and come back and be like, all right, this is the blend.
What do you see on the spreadsheets?
Chemistry. I think chemistry helps a lot. Like, chemistry is like when you can blend away sweetness, you can blend in acidity. I mean, I've never added water or acid to a Massican wine in 13 years of producing Massican wines. There was no reason to, right? I mean, I took risks early on because I was afraid of high pHs to harvest at low levels, so I never had to worry about alcohol. There's so many different things that you can kind of look at. But at the end of the days, after you got the first blend done the first year, I think it's the funnest part of my job, because I just sit there and I now say, this needs to smell and taste like Anya, because Anya has a personality and this is what it needs to be like. So if I know that I'm going to sit in a blending session saying this needs to smell and taste like Anya, I know what my harvest decisions are going to be. I know what my fermentation decisions are going to be. I know what barrels I'm going to use before I even get there. And I think that is the one thing that I did the same thing at Larkmead. I remember walking the vineyard at Larkmead over the years, and soon as I knew the first block was ready to pick, I went in and wrote the schedule for the next 28 blocks.
Okay, so you've got all this planned out. You know the barrels, you know everything else. Do you ever get any surprises?
Well,
I do get a lot of surprises. I mean, I don't make great wine every barrel. I like to do as many barrel blends as possible, and I get a lot of reduction. I get a lot of shitty, farty things. I don't like to add DAP or anything like that to my wines, and high nitrogen stuff, but I have to do it in instances where like it's super reductive. And I have vineyards like Bear Vineyard, the original Ribolla that came from Jasko Grosvenor, organically farmed by Steve Mathiasen. That shit comes over with no yan, no nitrogen that the yeasts need in order to have a healthy fermentation. And it comes over with zero, like nothing. I mean, I had vintages where it was like 9. I mean, winemakers in a room know that that's real bad.
Is that because of pick date, or just the variety?
The yan's not going to go up if I wait any longer.
Yeah, no, it's going to go down. It doesn't. Yeah.
So no, but
I'm gonna pick my brain up off the floor and dust it off.
It's disease vines and all that fun stuff. It is whatever. But when Andy saw that the Sauvignon Blanc in that situation in December 2009 was rambunctious and it didn't work, it took away the subtleties of the Tokai and the Ribolla and the Chardonnay's kind of marriage.
Cool.
And then I realized, and it just became a bully, and then I went home and I tried like 1%, 2%. I did all the things that you do, and I'm like, it just doesn't work, and I don't force it. And I didn't want, like, from logistics purposes, I didn't want 2 or 3 wines in my portfolio. I wanted one. I wanted to be like, Massican is a blended white wine, Mediterranean inspired, made from Italian grape varieties and a couple of Western varieties, and it's reminiscent of Friuli and the Collio Bianco blends that I adore.
Well, and at this time you also had, I mean, to say a full-time day job is probably an understatement. I mean, you were the winemaker at a legacy Napa Valley Cabernet house. So one white wine as your sort of like side project probably made a lot of sense in that mindset, right?
Oh yeah, it did. Yeah. It was in my business plan. 1 white wine,
which penciled better than 1 red wine.
But then if you just take it and you make 3 of them, you charge them all the same price. You don't have to really change the business plan.
but that
wine
was
business 101.
That was a growth step for you, right? Because instead of being there, all of a sudden you were extending it out.
Yeah. It was also the growth step was even one before that, which is the wine that I fashioned Massican against or towards was a wine called Vida de Romans Fior de Huis. And that wine from Friuli is Tokai Friulano, Malvasia, Istriana, not Bianca, Sauvignon Blanc, and Riesling. And it was super viscous, super powerful, super floral, but incredibly textural, but also refreshing and bright and fresh. And I was like, we have sunshine. We can go 14-1 on grape varieties here, white wine grape varieties in Napa Valley for days. And so I can make this bigger, richer, barrel fermented white wine with all of that characteristic. But my vineyard didn't allow for that to happen. The Old Vine Tokai at Nicolini wasn't gonna get to 22 bricks and 13% alcohol. The Ribolla was already at 20 bricks, was already a 3.4 pH. The Chardonnay, which was, came from Andy and came from Hyde Vineyard, Andy, off the back of the truck for the first couple of years, I was fortunate to get those grapes from him. That's an animal unto itself, because it's just a purely perfect chemistry in that wine. But the other grapes weren't going to do that. But Enrico from Arbe Garbe figured out how to do that. Like he figured out how to get the right grape varieties from the right sites and do some kind of fancy, dehydrating of stuff. He was hanging Malvasia from the rafters of Flora Springs, and it was dehydrating out the water and intensifying the viscosity and the sugars and all the other things. And he figured out how to get to that. And he was more of a Licenaris, Alsatian style of Friulian wines than he was maybe Vita Romans, which was, I think, a big, powerful wine, which is kind of in the camps of like Mianis. Not as Burgundian as things like Ranco Niemitz and Borgo d'Attilio. But so that was my first lesson. Like, what did I want to do? I couldn't do what I set out to do. Mm-hmm. So then I had to turn back and I said, well, what's my second favorite wine in Italy? And it's Veneca's Ranco de Mele Sauvignon Blanc. It's probably one of the greatest Sauvignon Blancs in the world. And that's a purely classically trained version of a Friuli white wine, all stainless steel, low to moderate alcohol, good freshness, good balance, and just like drinkable for days. So I said, all right, well, I'm going to lean into that, and then that's how I kept leaning.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
So I remember it was like 2010. That was the first time I'd heard of Ribolla Gialla, and it was from Enrico. And we were talking earlier. He like got busy one day, and so his wife showed up to do the tasting. There was a total language barrier, but what I understood, there was this one tiny little vineyard over in Napa that they had found, but I didn't think there was any other vineyards that were planted to it. So have they since planted more?
Yeah, that's 100% correct. It was in 2000 they started grafting a Pinot Grigio vineyard in George Vare's backyard vineyard, 6-acre backyard vineyard. And they started grafting the cuttings from Grosvenor's vineyard. And then it kind of in 2009, it just so happened I called Steve Mathias and I said, like, I saw this Ribolla Gialla and, on the list, and it said George Vare and at the French Laundry. And I'm like, you know about this? You live in Oaknoll? He's like, yeah, I know George. I farmed a vineyard for him. He's actually breaking up with Luna, so he's selling the fruit this year as opposed to selling it to Luna. And I was like, I'm in. And then George kind of like, I felt like maybe he was my mentor a little bit over the years, and really guided me on what I was trying to accomplish, and with the Collio Bianco concept with Anya. And then everyone fell in love with this whole Ribolla fest that we still do to this day.
Yeah.
George started it, and Steve and Jill maintain it, and like Leslie Rudd planted Ribolla on Mount Veeder. Lee Hudson planted Ribolla in Carneros, and then I started. I got Chris Boland to plant Ribolla, for me a couple times over. First time was diseased, and I got some other places, but that was that. I mean, I'm more a lover of Tokai than I am of Ribolla. I think Tokai is quite possibly the greatest food pairing grape of all time, and I'm leaning more into like plant more Tokai, less Ribolla. As many farmers I can get it.
Yeah,
because Ribolla is hard. Ribolla can be, it could be a love-hate relationship with its reductivity. It's a very reductive grape.
Yeah. You want to talk about Tempranillo and Napa?
You mean climate change?
Yeah, it's kind of an easy transition into, right?
Yeah. I will say you guys are pouring the Greco and Falagina blend. That's actually fruit from Lodi plus a little bit of Russian River with Chris Boland. I will say I made a big mistake in 2022 in ordering my corks. Driving around vineyard to vineyard, I order shit really early, and I kind of understand what my yields are, and I basically start ordering stuff in August for packaging because I'm bottling in February, and so I was trialing DMs, and I'm like, my prices are so low for my bottles. I'm like, I can't do Icon cork anymore at 70 cents a cork. no TCA, et cetera, et cetera. And so I called the Porta Cork folks and said, I have to downgrade to your technical corks. And I just knew that DM was like DM3 was their opening OTR, oxygen transfer rate, 3, 5, 10, blah. And then so I'm on the phone with my cork rep in Porta Cork, and I'm like, I'll take your OTR 3, and she just took down that I wanted the 3, and the 3 was actually their 10-year cork. So this is the 10-year cork that you just pulled out of that bottle. And so like this, so it kind of, it's great for longevity, but like my wines are built for, you know, speed. They're built for winning the race right out of the gate. And so like it's a little quiet. This wine, Jimena, as you're tasting right now, is a little quiet. But give it a little, you know, put that in the fridge, drink it a little bit later today. Right. It's not going to be a super warm day, but come with me to Don Giovanni, eat some fried olives, and drink this a little later. You'd be very happy.
Why
do we? It's still beautiful.
Why do we keep recording right before lunchtime?
You want to tell me what it says on your
5
label,
years?
Dan? You want to tell me what it says on your label?
Oh yeah,
I sure as hell can't read it.
It's so it's all my handwriting in Italian. It is designed to be like, if you read my label from left to right, it's designed to be like a page of a book. You came from publishing, you know, so Massican is title, Jimena is chapter, verse is what's written there, and then the vintage is the page number. And then you turn the bottle like you're turning a page, and it translates everything on the back.
Okay.
Yeah. So it takes up a lot of bottle space. It's really shitty Instagram label design, because from a distance you really can't tell what it is. But what we decided was the 3 things that were important to us were color and composition, and then story. So
if it makes someone pick it up off the shelf to see what it is,
Yeah.
also, right?
and what I've been telling myself, you know, this is hindsight's 2020. You know, you have to convince the marketing story that the intimacy with a bottle of wine is you actually have to pick it up and pour it for someone. So to your point, taking it off the shelf, when you're serving it to guests or your family or friends or loved ones or yourself, if you're that person, you're actually holding it in your hand. And I think that's the intimacy connection with the wine. And then so you will then either be engaged with it or not. And I think the color is electrifying enough. It's Pompeian blue, which is now considered Massican blue, based on my my travails to get to that color. And yeah, it's no, it was never meant to be red on the front. I get that comment a lot. It's not from young and old. It's very much cool, just little design. And I also say, look, it's like a drone picture of a vineyard from overhead. Right?
There's a couple missing vines there, I think.
Yeah, totally. Pierce's disease.
Yeah.
Those suckers just go in straight lines.
Climate change.
Climate change.
Yes, Tempranillo.
I mean, there's a bunch of other things.
Yeah, I mean,
but let's go there first.
Yeah, the other stuff is a whole other show. That's everything else.
The whole like Massican
ethos
and the social media presence and the things that you put out and create that are not wine, that are as
Just go to Massican Winery on Instagram and
it's a great follow.
Play around.
And you won't even know it's a winery.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's aspirational. I mean, everybody's like, I want to be that cool on social media.
I wish I was a tattooed female chef, you know, making the wines as well. I mean, Sarah's a killer. I love her. She's done wonders. I'm fortunate to edit her recipes and post her videos and work with Jordan McKay on putting the monthly chapters together. But going back, you'd asked earlier about just like the Larkmead was a 110-acre vineyard. It had this beautiful it was at a pinch point. It was at the funnel point of like the hourglass of the Napa Valley. It had everything was trying to get through it. The one thing that did get through it was the river, because water cuts through everything. Water is more powerful than anything and pushes through. But what it brought with it was rocks and gravel on one side, clay in the middle, which is basically the whole valley floor of Napa, and then, you know, the kind of the crushed rock and to the sand particulates on one side. So we had 3 beautifully diverse parcels, and we had a chance to play around with them, a chance to think about how they reflected not only the site, the place, but where else in the world they were reflected. How can we utilize that as an opportunity to consider where things are going, where we want to be in 25 years, well, what's happening. When we know in the last 20 years, we know in the last 10 years, 5 years, how drastic things have gone with extreme weather patterns, but also there's the cumulative warming of the planet, and it's even when we have like cold winters like we did this past year, it doesn't mean the core center of the Earth isn't still warming up. It's got inertia in that sense, or momentum in that sense. So I looked at the next 25 years. After the wildfires, I asked the owners if they were going to sell the property because it came really close, and they were like, "No, we're going to stay here. We're going to be farmers and grow grapes and make wine. It's a generational thing." And I was like, all right, well, if you're going to do that, I need to come up with a business plan that makes sense, because you don't want to be 25 years from now writing the business plan for what it looks like in a climate changing world or a climate changing Napa Valley. So I started looking at things like what's Napa Valley's masterful ability to do. It's to have marketed itself as this great wine growing region, which it is, from the boots on the ground to the national salespeople. We were some of the best in the business across the board. So I said, well, who has succeeded in the world at a level that we have, and what are the great wines of the world, and where are they from, and how could we mirror them? Because if Bob Mondavi was alive in 2020, 21, 22, 23, and started Mondavi then, there wouldn't just be the first growths of Bordeaux to look at. There wouldn't be Burgundy or the Hock wines of Germany to look at. There would be, I always say the two of the top 10 greatest wines of all time are going to be Vega Sicilia, which is a Tempranillo Cabernet blend, and Grange, which is a Shiraz Cabernet blend. And they are grown in conditions that are comparable or worse than what we have here today in Northern California. And when I say that in conditions, I'm speaking mostly of climatic conditions. So if you're a great wine collector of Napa Valley wines or of the world, you probably have heard of Vega Sicilia. You probably have heard of Grange. So, and those wines cost more than what the Larkbean wines were charging. So aspirationally, I was like, what if we can be Napa Valley's Vega? What if we can be Napa Valley's Grange? I think a lot of people have tried to be Grange over the years, but I think Napa Valley did a really good job trying to be Bordeaux and surpassing Bordeaux in its notoriety across the board of its volume of wines priced at that level. Stylistically, let's not even talk about style. I mean, we know we're not Bordeaux and Sonoma's not Burgundy, but what we've, in trying to mirror and aspire to what we love, we've created something great. And that's Napa wines, and that's Sonoma County wines. And I think that is something that we have to respect and stop. I think we've stopped as winemakers calling ourselves Burgundian and Bordelais and all that shit. I hope.
For the most part.
Yeah. But so that was the goal, was to say, okay, what does Napa look like in 25 years, and can we adapt, evolve? Like, I keep saying this and no one wants to believe it, but Napa Valley is fucking not even 30 years old. It started in 1994. I don't care if Larkmead was 125 years old. Sorry. It's like, you didn't make wine from like 1938 to 1998. I mean, like, you weren't making wine, you were selling grapes. No one cared about Napa Valley as much as we do today. No one put the money, the time, the energy, the effort to create a world-class wine growing region the way we have in the last 30 years, from 1994 to the present day. And I think that is something that we have to take pride in as that generation. And that generation is, people who came from outside the industry, and they came in and they had the first love of the first industry, the old days of the Mondavis and the BVs and the, Chapelets and all those, kind of iconic heritage brands of Napa Valley. And those are great, but if you look at those brands today, they're the iconic heritage brands of Napa Valley sold in supermarkets. And great, we need that. We need people having access to our wines. Where we are today is a completely different model. And those brands that still have survived because of their legacy. And good on them, nothing against them. But we needed them, but they gave us a springboard to do what the modern day Napa Valley has done, which in the last 30 years is an incredible case study. Yeah. And I think that it happened so fast and so hard. It was also happening during, when things were changing, that we weren't seeing the forest and the trees of the climactic changes. We were just seeing the consumer changing in demand, and we weren't looking around at everything else.
Yeah.
Now we're looking around at everything else, and it's going to be like, oh shit, we gotta prepare for this ultimate change. And I think that's an important thing that's hard to do when you're a family business who owns a vineyard and a winery, which I don't own a vineyard or a winery, just the right to make wine as a winery. And then you have a tasting space, and you're, like I always say, the reason why we don't look at 10 years ahead in Napa Valley is because we are worrying about who's coming through the door today and what the 10-day weather forecast is, and bottling next week, and hosting visitors, and making sure they had a great time, and getting their names down so that we can sell them wine later for, ROI and lifetime value and all the things. Like, we're hospitality businesses, we're restaurant businesses, we're farming businesses, we're agricultural, we're manufacturing, we're wholesale, third party. We've got people on the road trying to sell our wines. Like, that's a pretty vertically integrated business that is mind consuming, time consuming, dollar consuming.
I was gonna say cash consuming.
And I think so when you ask someone to think about, the synthetic herbicides they use or the changing climate, they're just like, I just don't have the fucking bandwidth. And I respect that, but we need to have the bandwidth or we're in trouble.
So how do you market white wines? I mean, because you're talking about DTC not really being the best option, right? So, I mean, where I get the bottles is anytime we drive by Oakville Grocer, we stop in and pick up a bottle or two. But I mean, how do you market to this demographic?
I buy the glass. And I said to myself, and pre-pandemic, I said, Massican is going, and my original business plan was predominantly wholesale as well. But in 2018, 2019, I said, Massican is going to be a 100% wholesale brand coming into the next era of my business. And the reason for that was DTC, white wine brands, hard. Shipping perishable goods, hard. Shipping
limited amount of time to ship those things.
Weight of shipping, expensive. $300 Cabernet is the same weight as a $30 bottle of Massican. The consumer doesn't like the ratio of $6 a bottle shipping of Massican versus $6 a bottle shipping of a $100 Cabernet. They can do the math on that one, and they're like, this doesn't make sense to me, and they exit the cart. And I'm like, I'm not gonna have to. I don't want to plea to people to say, buy my wine. I'm just, what I plead to people to say is, I'm transparent in everything I do. I'm going to be transparent in my marketing. I could raise my price $6 and charge you $1 for shipping, and you'll think I'm God's gift to, wine sales. But I'm like, that's just marketing, lying through marketing. And I don't want to do that. And so I'll go through the process of having that conversation with the customer when they bitch at me about my shipping costs being expensive. And I still subsidize 20% of the shipping costs. So so I really want Massican to be a by the glass, full-time by the glass experience, so that people can have a glass of wine at the table, at the bar, anywhere that they can have it. So I want it sold in retail. I want people bringing the wine home. And I thought, the thing that made me so happy during the pandemic, and I never wished that those times on us ever again, but it made me so happy that we were forced to be around the table with family and friends. At 6 feet in some instances, but we were really forced to come together and eat together, drink together, stay together, and have that table experience, which was so important to my family when we were growing up as kids, and my grandparents and their grandparents and the generations before us. It was about the table, right? We saw it in TV shows. There was more of the TV shows in the 60s, 70s, and 80s were always like, there were people sitting at tables and having dinner together. And
well, people sat in living rooms eating dinner, watching those shows, right?
Yes. That smells good. So I think about just how do I get more bottles of Massican on tables? And the easiest way to do it for me was I used my old... I tell the story all the time, and I don't know if people listen to me. Everyone says restaurants build brands. I'm like, by the glass builds brands. You can be one of one wine on a 300 page list or a 300 wine list, and great. You can tell the the visitors to your tasting room that you're on the French Laundry wine list. Guilty by association. Great. Use that marketing. But you're not. But that same case of wine is going to be there for, you're going to deplete it once a year. The first year of Massican Sauvignon Blanc, they sold 50 cases by the glass. And that's 5 bottles, 12 bottles, 600 bottles. That's 3,000 glasses of Massican Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah. And people talking about it.
That's significant.
And for me, if you think about it that way, how much would you pay for that? So what I did was I sold advertising in magazines, and Time Magazine, the inside cover spread is the most expensive. It's the one that people remember. You focus group magazine readers. Everyone remembers the Ford ad. Everyone remembers the Estee Lauder ad or the Gucci ad or whatever, and that's opening spread because it's the first thing you see. And then you get the table of contents, right? So, you open a wine list, the first thing you see is about a glass.
Yeah.
And there's 30 options between white, red, rosé, now the sparkling, all the different things. But if you can be one of the 30, as opposed to being in the 30 pages behind it, what would you pay for that? And so I did Instagram advertising, and it was costing me $5 to get one person to sign up for my Instagram account. $5 for one sign up. And that was, what did I get from it? I have no idea. Well, I do actually, but it's another podcast. But then I was like,
not $5 worth probably though.
But I was like, what if I could do this in California. It's harder to do this in other states because of the way pricing works with wholesales and so forth and so on. But in California, I can give a restaurant a $5 a bottle discount. And that's pouring it by the glass. That's $1 a glass that I'm paying out of a marketing budget, a fictitious marketing budget, for someone to drink my wine in the place I want them to drink it, at a table. And I'm like, is that not worth $1? Yeah. And then and I didn't have to do this with the French Laundry. I didn't have to discount with the French Laundry because their system is built to kind of price everything the way it needs to be priced. But if you're going to do that, and you can get, I'm very, very blessed to be poured by the glass for the last 3 years in a row at State Bird Provisions. And I'm doing that whole model with them, make $5. And I'm like, how many, they've gone through a pallet a year for 3 years. That's 30,000 glasses of Massican a year at that restaurant. And I don't care if these people don't buy my wines on my website. They might buy them at K&L. They might buy them the next time they're at the restaurant. They might buy them in a retail shop in their hometown. I don't care. Everyone asks what's succeeding and what's not succeeding in selling wine. I'm like, well, I'm sold out 4 months a year. I'm doing a lot of weird shit. It's the cumulative effect of all of it that I'm creating, recognition of, recall. And that to me is the most important thing. That's why when anyone, I talk to advertisers, I talk to marketers, I talk to PR people, and clients all want ROI. Did that influencer that I paid $900 to do a post in the grid? Did they get me any sales? And I'm like, that's not the game, dude. You don't get that ROI. Yeah. That's not the game. It's, I always go back to the same reference point. Ford's does not sell a shit ton of F-150s a day after the Super Bowl, but they spent $5 million showing you 2 ads. But they're not waiting for that $5 million to come in on Monday morning when all of us are driving to the Ford lot to buy the new F-150. That's just not happening. But it's part of the bigger mix to make Ford F-150 the greatest pickup truck sold in America.
And it is.
And it is.
And they've got a marketing mix. You never rely on one thing.
Yeah.
And they just dropped their price of the
on the $10,000 on the Lightning. Yeah, I know.
Electric.
I think everybody who bought one last week is pretty pissed though.
I would be. Absolutely.
Maybe it wasn't delivered, so maybe they'll get a rebate.
You know what? I got a phone call yesterday.
Are you on the list?
I got a phone call yesterday from Monarch Tractors.
Oh yeah,
they're aggressively, I got an email and then I got a phone call from a person saying, "Hey, call me back. We'll get you a tractor. It's put you on the list. It's easy."
Well,
cheap.
There's also, there's a whole bunch of totally off topic, but there is a whole bunch of rebates and the California. The one that we bought. You don't pay nearly the sticker price because of all those incentives to get those tractors out there in the fields.
I'm just shocked.
Are you gonna buy one to drive around your horse paddock or something?
No, for the tractor parade this year, I'm gonna get one.
Oh, there you go.
Are these new electric tractors?
I gotta ask Carlo Mondavi if he looked at the pie. Because Because I actually I remember hearing a great story from KJ from Julian Chevreau when he was at KJ, and they brought a bunch of tractor producers, manufacturers to Sonoma County to talk about making a lightweight tractor, not an electric tractor. And he told me that that John Deere turned him down because he said that the wine industry was a rounding error.
Was it
Wow.
A rounding error. You don't see John Deere out here, right? It's like it's
Not
rare.
much. Yeah.
It's rare.
Yeah.
So he's like, yeah,
Kubota.
it's a rounding error. So we're not gonna do some R&D for you to like build a lightweight tractor because your business isn't big enough. I mean, the wine industry's not like, I mean, there's 90 million acres of agriculture in America. There's 55,000 here in Sonoma County, right? 45,000 in Napa County, and that's the biggest in the North Coast. It's 100,000 out of 90 million.
Yeah.
We are we're the hardest things to grow in agriculture. We're the most high touch things to grow in agriculture. We produce the most carbon in farming in agriculture because of our high touch, but we are a fraction of the total agriculture of America.
Most carbon, like per acre? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But still, that's a big number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we're just,
It's a small number.
we're
Right. Small number.
at
of-
every level.
For a big
Right,
number.
for-
Yeah, at every level, even at the $2 chuck level, at the $3 bottle level, it's still more high touch than corn or soy or wheat and so forth and so on. So it's like you have to remember that this industry is it's luxury farming, in essence.
Do you remember the article where Fred Franzia said the reason why we can sell $2 chuck is because we have, X a million corks standing, X amount of glass standing, and our rows are so long that we save money on tires because we don't have to turn the tractors as much. That was in like Wine and Business Practical Winery or something.
that's
genius.
a pie,
Yeah.
right?
That's
That's
right.
a pie.
It's genius. No, I'm a terrible driver. But since we've gotten these little devices on your dashboards now, I'm like, why do people look at RPMs? Like, why do we have RPMs on car? I'm like, who the fuck drives with RPMs?
Unless you're driving a stick, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, and like,
Well,
you're
or
ma-
still does it even? You can hear it.
Yeah, exactly.
and so I'm like, with automatics, I'm like, but what I realized with RPMs is gas mileage, and so I've become a better driver, and I'm also the turning thing that you're talking about, and the braking thing. It's like all the things about how often I want to, which reminds me, I need to go get my oil change. 7,500 miles, right? It's like, anyhow, it's like made me a more thoughtful driver in that sense. And that's the only reason why I look at RPMs, because I can then equate it to 30 miles a gallon versus 20 miles a gallon versus 40 miles a gallon. And then the turning and the braking and the tires.
Start monitoring your your miles per gallon while you're driving. Like,
That's what I'm doing.
Do it with
It's a game.
with cruise control.
Yeah.
Like you can change your miles per gallon,
Getting your foot off the gas.
getting your foot off the gas and let it, and now I have a new truck that has the radar. So if you're on cruise control and you approach the car in front, it will slow down for you.
Yeah.
And it's not hitting the brake. It's
No.
just slowing the vehicle down. And it's
Distance that you tell it to stay away from the car in front of you.
so less brakes,
just
less fuel. I get better gas mileage.
I think
Still terrible gas mileage, but
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I've gamified.
What's the new one get?
12.
No, I get 17. And like if I'm just on the highway, like just driving somewhere during that time on the highway, I can get like 22.
Will you just talk about this Chardonnay? 'Cause it's fucking
Yeah.
beautiful.
I mean,
So this is Hyde Vineyard. I am very blessed to be working with Hyde Vineyard. Andy Smith got me that intro years ago. It also happened I was one of my earliest friends in Napa was Stéphane Vivier, who was the winemaker for Hyde de Villaine HDV winery.
Yeah.
So I got to know Larry and his wife
amazing.
Beta early on in the game, and then when I started working directly with Hyde Vineyard, I started working with Larry's son Chris, and Chris is a buddy now, and just a great proponent of agriculture and continuing to grow and making sure that we're doing the right thing for the community. And he's been great for me. It's a great an opportunity for me to continue to grow my production through sourcing more fruited Hyde. I make wines. Hyde is made at Hyde Estate Winery. like Larry and Chris make their own personal wines at. So I make the wine there alongside the Jamina that you're tasting as well today. And 100% new French oak, 100% Chardonnay. It's large format.
Would have never guessed. Would have never guessed.
Especially with the aromatics.
Simple explanation to this one. It's a hogshead barrel, 300 liters versus 225, so a little large, like more wine to wood ratio. Light toast. I love Allier forest. Allier to me has always been slightly more a softer, gentler, aromatic forest for French oak. And wine doesn't go through ML, so you don't have the creamy, lactic-y extraction from the oak and like the blend of the oak. So you still got that, green apple pop. And it's lower alcohol, so you don't have the solvency of extracting the yolk. And so you add all those things together. That's what you asked earlier about what do you see on paper. Well, you could see why all those things will potentially do something like that. Is that like a given rule? No, I'm not a recipe winemaker on paper, but numbers don't lie.
Changes that, right?
And things happen, and so that's how it's been. And for me, it was a more pragmatic, practical approach to why this is 100% new French oak, because nothing else in my portfolio deserves new French oak. Maybe a little Sauvignon Blanc, but I was like, you guys know, as winemakers,
you got a bunch of nice barrels for the rest of the lineup after that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like no one sells their white wine barrels. I mean, Stony Hill was using them for 25 years. Other places like 10, 15 years in. Yeah. So it's hard to buy neutrals, and then you're going to spend a lot of money on a neutral barrel. I'm like, So I was like, okay, I want to get to a point. I have a plan to get to a point where I'm exclusively Hermitage, exclusively hogsheads. How many years of buying 12 barrels how many years is it going to take me to get to that point with my growth potential? And then also implementing stainless steel Muellers for the Sauvignon Blanc production. And then, so it literally had like a 7-8 year plan to get there. And then I can get rid of, I did buy some early, stuff from Dumas and, some old barrels from Larkmead and stuff. Larkmead's Sauvignon Blanc production diminished over time. So I bought those barrels and just to kind of keep my production going. But now I'm moving more into stainless on things like Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Grigio, and which is going to be a big push moving forward. I fret doing things like Tokaj Filano and Ribolla Gialla through stainless steel because they are super reductive varieties and not treated properly, you're fucked. You'll ruin a vintage. And again, I don't know how to fix it, so I'm not a chemist. I'm not an academic. I don't know how to fix the screw-ups I make in wine, so they either get dumped down the drain or made into vermouth or mostly dumped down the drain. And so I tried my best to have TLC so I don't dump anything down the drain, and it would increase my ROI on that particular parcel. 57 cases per ton. And I would love to get to that, valued 60 cases per ton on white wine, but
press harder.
Yeah. I get 160 gallons a ton now that I'm not at Larkmead. Larkmead had a nice old 2.5 ton Wilms that, try to do 85 tons in a 2.5 ton Wilms by yourself and clean that fucking press 3 times a day. Those were the days. I don't miss that.
And then sleep for 45 minutes and wake up and do it again the next day.
I'm all tired. I'm too old and too tired and too lazy to do that these days. But I like my 6 and 12 ton presses now. Yeah. Some of them are self-cleaning.
There's the dream. Yeah. There's the real dream.
Yeah. Quote unquote self-cleaning. Yeah. You're still in there.
Just never turn it off.
Yeah. Right. That's the best thing.
I was like, why do we turn the sorting equipment off? Can't we just process 24 hours a day in 6 days and get it all over with instead of 3 weeks and have to clean it? Clean it 6 times as opposed to 18 times. Right. I'm like, why not?
An intern one time says, why do you clean the press at the end of the night? Just leave the grapes in it and start again in the morning. You can just see the winemaker just like doing this.
He's went the opposite direction. He's probably now working in advertising, right?
Well, Dan, thank you very much.
Yeah, we know you got to go. What's one thing you want to make maybe in the future we'll look forward to that you're not doing right now?
When's the red coming out?
No, don't start.
Pinot Grigio, honestly.
Pinot Grigio for
Grigio,
sure. Yeah.
And it's not. It's going to be. What I want to do is I want to take a stab at, using that 24-25% we have varietally to kind of make it Pinot Grigio and something. What is that thing right now? It's probably Greco. Could be Sauvignon Blanc, but if I want to make a consumer-friendly Pinot Grigio, probably not Greco. If I want to scale it, it's probably Chardonnay. Maybe. I mean, we don't have to talk about what grape is in there. Cortese is possibly a really good blender there. I think it's going to do really well just because it's such malleable and it's just so easy to drink, and it adds just kind of drinkability with Cortese blends.
I'm blown away. Like, you're referencing all these grape varieties, which I've had so few of them, yet you never go home and open a bottle of wine by yourself and taste them. Where do you drink all this wine?
I have a tasting group, a lot of friends, like my wife obviously, and so when I open wine, it's like I'll open 24 bottles and I'll tell my friends, hey, I just opened 24 bottles. They're all open. You want to come over and drink them? And like, so seriously, like by
volume, he opens a bottle a day.
There's the yes. I've always said I love food and cocktails and dessert and all those things so much that I don't need. For me, wine is here and here. It's not here.
Yeah.
And I just pointed at my nose, my mouth, and I said it's not at my stomach because I don't need any extra attire around my stomach because I already have a couple.
Right.
But I think that wine gives me so much pleasure, so much intellectual stimulation, smelling it and drinking it. You said earlier about red wines. Giuseppe Mascarello and Mon Privato, and I'll just leave it at this. I hope it's the last thing I smell before I die.
Yeah. All right. Any shout outs you guys want to give?
How to make sure people, I guess if you're not following Massican
Winery,
I'm just going to say
on Instagram.
Wrong forever. It's just like French wine. I'll just pronounce it wrong so I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
But yeah, follow on it on Instagram.
Yeah.
$6 a bottle shipping sounds like a deal. So buy some wine online. Change the paradigm, the algorithm on DTC white wine because these wines are great.
Yeah, look for it on By the Glass, and if it's not there, then ask about it.
Right. There you go.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Love you guys. Thank you. I'm sorry I got to run. I got a board meeting.
No, you're
No,
good.
all good.
Yeah.
Just run out of here.
And we talked about some unique varietals. Look forward to this. Is going to come out in 2 weeks. We are going to definitely talk about Saint Laurent. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, we have a guest coming up. I don't know if it's going to be the week after this. The Ricci family and Tara Jane Albee from Own Root Collective is going to come on, and Tyler is coming with his dad. So they're all going to be on the show at the same time.
Cool.
Yeah. So we can talk about Saint Laurent if any of you even know what the fuck that is.
Of course.
Oh, Bart. That's right. Bart's got a whole history with Saint Laurent.
I mean, I could have had a history with Saint Laurent.
You could have. That's right. He could have had a history with Saint Laurent.
You want some free grapes?
John.
All right.
Jasmine came out fast for that one.
Sam, any other shout outs?
We got some Vinyl Sundays on the calendar.
Excellent.
August 6th, Stanley Mass Appreciation Day. We'll have some art here for it. He will not be making it. Still recovering from a stroke, but I think his daughter will be here. We got great music, great food for that one.
You think he made it to any of the shows?
I doubt it.
No,
I doubt it. There was some luminaries of the Grateful Dead world that were there. Wavy Gravy and Johanna were there. John Myers, who made all the speakers, was there with his wife. Jerry's wife, former wife, Mountain Girl. And Trixie were there. So there was a lot of people there, but Stanley didn't make it.
I'm hoping that Stanley could look out his window and see the drones. The shot I did for you.
Well,
of his.
That would have been quite a view from Sebastopol, John.
Oh, well, okay. Sorry about that. Yeah.
But it would have been. The drones were awesome.
Well, get him one of those photos.
Yeah, I will. Yeah. I will. And then, of course,
And
as dubbed by Brian Casey, greatest concert to ever happen in Sonoma.
ever.
September 17th.
Ever.
Catherine Russell, part of our epic Grenache Day weekend of
It's going to be fun.
debauchery.
Yeah, if you're not going to be there, be nowhere.
Right. Bart?
Dinner Festival.
That's coming up, man.
Go to
It's going to be fun.
SonomaValleyWines.com. SonomaValleyWine.com. So
Lots of
now.
fun. Vintage
Yep.
Festival is always a great time, man. So, all right, plan your vacations, everybody, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening.